Some might argue that was a political statement, Kieran.
Welcome to Thinking Deeply About Primary Education, the podcast that makes time and space to think about pedagogy, teaching and learning, professional development, anything of interest to time-poor but enthusiasm-rich primary teachers. This week, I'm joined by Neil Almond.
Hello.
And we're going to explore what is going to be left behind when Key Stage 1 SATs are finally removed. But first, Neil, what you reading for?
Hey, what you reading for?
So going back to a paper that I'm sure many listeners will be aware of, it's that paper by Kraft and Pape from 2014, Can Professional Environments in Schools Promote Teacher Development? The reason why I went back to this is because I've kind of recently just realized how powerful Microsoft Forms can be as a sort of data gathering tool within an organization. I was interested, how did Kraft and Pape come up with how they realized what a good professional environment is? Because this is that kind of famous graph where if you're in a school that has a strong professional environment as teachers, your contribution to pupils' math score, far outweighs those that either don't have this kind of culture at all, or like worse than that is that the culture is rubbish. So I read it, and then I kind of had a look at it was kind of a bit of a close read of it, because there's lots of maths in there which I just don't understand at all. But then I realized it said something like, oh, the questions that we asked can be found in Appendix A on like the online thing. And I try as I might, I could not find Appendix A online. But Matthew Kraft's email was there, so I emailed Matthew Kraft to say, I'm trying to find this. I'm probably being really stupid here, but if you could tell me where it is, I'd really appreciate that. And actually, he got back to me. Well, I sent the email off, and then I got like an immediate bounce back saying I'm on sabbatical. I was like, oh, great, okay, well, this is going to take a while. But then this morning, early afternoon, he emailed me back with the questions that they used for to work out what constitutes these professional environments and the scales and all of that stuff. So I've asked our kind of director of primary education if he's feeling brave, maybe on September, this might be something he wants to do across the whole trust, just to kind of, have a look and see what's actually going on and what's it like out there, because it will be an interesting bit of knowledge gathering, I think. What about you, Kieran? What are you reading for?
Nice. That's amazing. Yeah, I mean, big fan of that paper. And the fact that he got back to you while on sabbatical is amazing. So thank you very much, Matthew. Did you ask him to come on the podcast?
No, but I haven't replied saying thank you yet. So maybe I'll in that reply I will link him up.
Send him a QR code.
Yeah.
Since you got some free time on your hands now.
Exactly. Yeah, you don't seem to be doing much. So
nice. I have been reading. Well, it's a blog post by Alex Quigley, and it's from February this year, called 5 Free Research Reads on ... retrieval practice.
Sounds like a Sunday 5 to me. Sounds like he's taking his inspiration there from someone.
Is he infringing on your copyright? Maybe I'll have to take this out.
Hardly.
But it's a great selection. I mean, you've got papers from Agarwal et al. You've got Liu, Yu, Vadillo, and Shanks. That's testing boost classroom learning.
Mm-hmm.
What else we got? We got optimal learning strategy depends on learning goals, processes. I think that was retrieval practice versus worked examples. I'm not going to list all the names of the papers. And then you've got the Lyle et al. One about spacing and mathematics knowledge. And yeah, basically, if you want to engage with research, I mean, I was doing a talk today for teachers in Australia, and we were trying to sort of look at how to be evidence informed. And I think this is definitely a place that they might want to visit, and probably any teacher who's dipping their toe into the world of education research. Yeah, well worth checking out, and always good when the research is freely available too.
Absolutely.
So this week, we're going to explore what is for us a watershed moment, something that we've been calling for a long time. I mean, it's the kind of thing that if we had a producer on this show, they could go back and find all the times that we've mentioned this before, because I'm pretty sure you first mentioned it during the first quiz
I think I did.
episode. The removal of Key Stage 1 SATs is finally upon us. For anyone who's not up to speed, what's going on, Neil?
I think since SATs were ever introduced in England, they've always been done kind of at, well, it used to be at every kind of, well, the first three key stages. So one at Key Stage 1, one at Key Stage 2, one at Key Stage 3. They got rid of Key Stage 3 a while ago. I'm not sure the exact date. Key Stage 2 is still there. And now, since the introduction of the reception baseline, they're now finally, after I think a year or two delay because of COVID, getting rid of the statutory assessments that happen at Key Stage 1. Crucially, that also means, and I wasn't sure about this until only kind of really a couple of months ago, whether the moderation aspect would still happen, because initially I thought, oh, what's going to happen is that they'll make the SATs part optional, but they'll still send local authority moderators around to, make sure that our teacher assessment against the teacher assessment framework for Key Stage 1 is accurate, but no, moderation is going as well. And so it really does kind of present a rare opportunity, I think, given that, this isn't like a seismic event in terms of a brand new policy announcement. This is kind of something that's been on the radar for a while now. And now it's kind of finally here, because schools, particularly academies over local authority schools, they can now make changes that means that the curriculums that they put in front of those children are better suited to the children, and not about getting them to an arbitrary stage before they sit this, relatively high accountability assessment that happens at the end of year 2. So interesting times.
Nothing will be left at all.
Nothing.
They're just going to take it away. I mean, how long were you teaching the last time this happened? And they took away levels and left nothing in its place. Were you just in?
And then we just reinvented levels, didn't we? Again, we just called it working towards plus and all of that kind of thing. I mean, they're still, what's quite interesting is that they are still, the STA are still going to be produce papers every year, but their use is going to be completely optional. Now, I can kind of see two ways that this goes, possibly three. One is that for some schools just carries on as normal. Nothing changes completely. Either head teachers, MAT CEOs, whoever can make those kind of decisions, just say, we need something to measure pupil progress, whatever that may mean. So let's just carry on, boom, with these SATs. There'll be some schools where the only change is that actually now we don't have to give away a bit of curriculum time towards, SAT preparation. And I don't mean that in terms of drilling pupils and, going off curriculum, but these are 7-8-year-olds at the end of the day. So things like, how do we turn our page over properly? How do we actually make sure our answers are in the right box? And that, the kind of things that is just good practice when it came to doing the SATs at that age. And then what I'm hoping and what I'm definitely an advocate for is this kind of third option where we decide, we're not going to do the SATs at all. But being in an academy, can we be a little bit clever in terms of the curriculum freedoms that are afforded to us about how we can shape curricula of certain subjects, where certainly sort of what's been taught and the content has definitely been put in place has been inescapable because of the this Key Stage 1 checkpoint. And so now I feel like is a wonderful time where perhaps we've talked about on the podcast before, if we don't teach them how to tell the time to the nearest 5 minutes by the time they're 8 years old, okay, well, actually, if we don't do that, this affords us a little bit more time to do the things that we think will make a difference.
We didn't follow the English national curriculum in my previous school. And despite the fact that we knew that when we started in year 1 at Christmas time and we ended at February of year 6, we knew the pupils would cover the things we felt were important. Come this time of year in year 2, my colleagues, no matter who they were, and there were many of them, because just to staff rotation and stuff within the school, would always ask, well, what do I do about this? We haven't taught this. And obviously my answer is, I don't really care, because I know, and any moderator worth their salt will know that this is all just advisory. So I'm glad that conversation doesn't need to happen anymore, because I think, we're going to focus on maths, I think, in this episode.
Yeah.
And then we'll visit, because I think there's enough for a couple of episodes, and then maybe even some follow-up if people listen and think, actually, I've got some ideas, because we have lots of school leaders and Key Stage 1 teachers who might have opinions themselves. But I'm really looking, this is a blank slate that we've got. And, we have been saying for a long time that even the curriculum itself is advisory, because if you can get through those checkpoints, then you can basically free to do whatever you want. I know it's not officially advisory, but you could not teach time and still be considered to be working at the expected standard. In much the same way that most schools don't get right at teaching algebra in Key Stage 2.
Absolutely.
But pupils are still considered to be working at the expected standard. I mean, you sort of started to mention options there, Neil. What options do you think schools have in terms of maths and how we assess pupils, if at all?
So again, like I preface this from the pure legality side of it. Easier for academies, local authorities, whilst they need to follow the national curriculum, they are allowed to change content within the key stage, but technically they shouldn't place content out of that key stage into another key stage. So anything in key stage 1, you couldn't say if you worked in a local authority school, you need to go and put this in key stage 2. Now, realistically, how bothered would an inspector really know that? Would anyone actually ever know that? I highly doubt it, quite honestly. I don't think, with the deep dive in maths, I don't think they have that time to go through such detail with a fine tooth comb. But also, if you're getting good outcomes and everything else is right, why should that even matter? So for local authority schools, the kind of conversations that they can have is, we teach fractions, and this idea of fractionness in year 1, you could decide to take fractions and time completely out of year 1 and perhaps back end that towards the end of year 2 now, with the year 2 content as well, because there's not that much different between those two year groups. When, as I'm sure you're fully aware, that maturation period is kicked in, their understanding of number is kicked in, knowing that you don't have to teach that content, say, to make sure they can answer those questions in the Key Stage 1 SATs, but also if when the moderators come to that door, you don't need to go and show them evidence that they can do A, B, and C with regards to fractions. So that's, I think, your kind of the local authority option. If you want to kind of be as bold as that. The other option, if you are within a MAT and an academy and you have far greater curriculum freedoms, is that you could turn the whole thing on its head if you wanted to. You literally have between year 1 and year 6 to play with now. So if you wanted to just ensure that kids knew shape and number before, between year 1 and year 3, you could feasibly do that. And, whatever then you also had to cover, which I think is, quite exciting. I have concerns whether that will actually happen. I think because Many schools use things like White Rose. I don't think White Rose are going to produce a different document that says, you know what, if you're not interested about SATs, then use this progression document. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe that's something they're planning to do. I'm not sure. Edit this bit out, obviously, but equally, I'd like to see complete maths have that option as well, where it's like, we can do that through the schemes aspect of it, but I would love you can view like the Scottish curriculum on there. I would love another one that says, if you don't want to do, you're not worried about this key stage 1 checkpoint, here's an alternative curriculum that means you spend a bit more time doing bits and pieces. So I don't want to say I make a bit more work for you, Kieran, but it'd be an interesting one to take back to the maths team to find out.
That's what happened when I've written stuff for the curriculum in the past. So whenever I wrote stage 0, I was only considering maths. I didn't consider any one state and their curriculum. So for instance, you won't find doubling and halving in stage 0, because I personally think that's something that should come later. I think it's part of your understanding of number that you're just not, it just doesn't fit the sequence. Equally, what was the other thing I cut? Odd and even numbers. I think there's a time and a place for that, and it's probably a couple of years later. Let's get our head around the fundamentals. So, my track record, so to speak, would suggest that if when I get the opportunity, it'll be the maths that comes first, as opposed to the the national curriculum of one particular country, because obviously we've got customer schools in quite a lot of different countries at the moment. So it's it's very exciting. I mean, one thing I'm really interested in is whether or not schools will stop teaching the formal written algorithm now, because how many times have we said it? Me and Chris did a double video. Shannon was hopefully going to make it a triple video where we all had to think. Shannon obviously reticent sometimes to get involved in these things, but she's a big proponent of the idea that, well, why are you teaching that formal written method when there are so many other more efficient and effective ways to teach calculation? Chris asked me about a couple episodes ago about what happens when your pupils don't know X, Y, and Z, and one of the things is we've been thinking flexibly. Do you reckon that this is the time for the formal written algorithm to disappear until, year 3 is fine, but key stage 1 aren't totally unnecessary?
Yeah. The extreme would be, do you know what? Like, they shouldn't have to write an equation down. If they want to draw things, absolutely fine. But I'd be so content if we just taught oral written methods. They could draw a few things down, get some 10 frames out, whatever it is that you want to do to teach them, whatever mental method that you want to teach them, and they just write the answer down on the board. I think, I'm not saying I maybe would advocate that. Maybe perhaps for year 1 I would, while we, practice number formation outside of the context of trying to work out, some calculations. But yeah, I can see that should go completely. There's no excuse now trying to teach kids, column method for adding 21 plus 50, where, they should be able to work that out in their heads quicker than they can write it down in their book, because then it just instills bad habits. And you see that all the way to year 6, where it's just no real basic stuff, where if you know your mental methods and you have that flexibility, you'll be fine.
I mean, already we've got time, fractions, formal written algorithms. They're all fan favorites of things, whenever we ask, what are we going to shift out of the curriculum and stuff like that there. Do you reckon there's anything else that teachers should be aware of that needs to go at this point? Things like, okay, this is our chance to get rid of this now.
Formalization of trying to do some of the measure objectives. I think they should be able to measure with a ruler. Absolutely fine. Within a 30 centimeter length. Anything over that, no, because at no point in their young lives are they going to try and measure anything over a meter with various meter sticks. At no point in their lives at school, bar perhaps if you're doing a little bit of cooking, perhaps, are you going to do, measure the volume of, turn the tap on, put a jug under it to get the correct volume of water. You'll do that perhaps when cooking, and I think that's a great time to introduce that skill then. Let's do that at that point. So I think, you could look at the I think you could look at that. That'd be quite an interesting place to go, I think. Because again, these things, we get the measuring equipment out and it all just kind of tends to, it comes out for that 2 or 3 weeks when that unit happens, then it goes away again and they never use it again. So I think far better to kind of teach that in the context of your DT or something like that. Take a lesson to be like, right, we're going to build whatever it is we need, or to make whatever it is, we need 500 grams of flour. Let's practice getting those things out and doing that without having to worry necessarily about, the formalization of perhaps teaching it. Because all that happens is that they just get a worksheet of, a fake jug of water with some scales, and then they need to do that. And that's the other thing that can then go, why are we teaching children how to read scale intervals when they're 7 and 8 years old, when they don't really understand how to, they can't use a number line properly to, do a mental method where you might want to say just, bridge to the nearest 10, for example, where they can't bridge to the nearest 10 and just realize they can skip 3. I don't think they're going to be able to work out that the intervals of 4 means that it's going up in, or the intervals of 5 mean that each smaller interval is worth 2. So I think there's a few things that we can, really kind of look at, and not say not teach them, but not make it into like a formal maths lesson.
That's a really good shout. I mean, I think jumping straight into the use of actual units of measurement is something I think we do far too early in general, and it's also reading scales and things is also one of those things that with just a little bit more maturity, it's actually quite a pleasant experience. Oh yeah, this like time. If you let a child gradually build up their knowledge of time outside of school, and then all of a sudden then you sort of focus on the intricacies, when they're a bit older, it's an easier process. Whereas if you're banging away, banging your head off the table with 5 and 6 year olds, you're totally right, because those why are all these little lines here? What does this mean? And then you're just getting random sort of things. I mean, my youngest has been exploring weight on tutor, but it's all been the comparison. And it's been to a degree sand measurement, but it's like pan balances, and you've got lots of pan balances, and you're thinking, well, which of these 3 is the heaviest? That kind of exploration of space and measures is I think much richer than the formal process of measuring stuff.
Definitely.
Because you can learn, at some point you will need to learn this, and you could probably do it very quickly. So I think you're spot on. That's a good shout. I mean, we don't mention it enough, but it's probably because geometry and measures and things often come on the back burner, don't they? They get half a unit at the end of the academic year.
And I think there's a lot to be said about making sure we don't throw space out with the bathwater on this. Shape with the bathwater on this. Obviously, when shape and space was left out of the new early learning goals, the maths community were, quite rightly upset because of how important shape space is at that particular age. So I don't think I'd go as far as, we're perfectly happy for them to explore shape and the world around them, because that's something tangible that they can then go and, you showed the kids what a square is, they will notice squares from there on. It's something tangible in the real world that they'll use, is, I imagine, for a 7-year-old, a real kind of threshold concept that this abstract lines, the connection of lines that they've been seeing has a name, and there are properties to that, etc., etc. But I don't feel like they get the same with that formalization of measurement, with the exception, of course, of how you said it, understanding, big, bigger, biggest, heavy, heavier, heaviest, and, all of those superlatives. So, yeah, I think that's far more beneficial for pupils of that age. Absolutely. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to the complete maths rewrite of Classroom and Tutor based on all of this.
Oh dear, so much work to do. Tim comes to you and he says, Neil, what are we going to do in Key Stage 1? And then you say, right, okay, I've got a plan. What would your ideal solution be?
Number bonds within 20. Number bonds within 20, check. I will quite happily die on the hill that if the government if the trade-off for getting rid of Key Stage 1 SATs was a number bond check at year 2, do it. I think number bond check within 20 would be one of those simple lever to press where, as you say, the assessment wags the tail of what gets taught. So if that meant that teachers actually then spent so much more time just really making sure that kids were, not just knew their number bonds off by heart, but, had a deep conceptual understanding of how they're working them out, what mental methods that they're using, that would be so good. Be so good, because you see it with children, and not just those that you would classify as lower attaining, but I think for most children, what holds them off from loads of things like perimeter, volume, perimeter more precisely, what holds them off from really understanding perimeter is the fact that they spend too much time thinking about what is the addition of all of these measurements, and then the concept of perimeter just falls out of their head. They don't tie it back to perimeter. It's just adding these 4 numbers up, and they lose sight very quickly of the concept that lies beneath that, because they don't know those simple facts. And so I would definitely introduce a check of addition facts within 20. And I think I've managed to convince myself on a train from Belfast to Dublin that should include related subtraction facts as well.
The Starship Enterprise?
The Starship Enterprise, quite right.
That's the train that goes from Belfast to Dublin, isn't it?
Yeah.
Where did you get on? You got on Belfast?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a nice train. I mean, I haven't been on one for a long while.
It's a very nice
when I lived there.
Very nice train. Shannon and I were very impressed by the quality of comfort and legroom and space.
Nice. I mean, when that train was first introduced, I think we still had the old trains with the pull down windows and the handle on the door.
Oh yeah.
So that was the first time I saw a train that wasn't from the 1960s.
Nice.
So yeah, it was. That's why I called it the Starship Enterprise. It was like going into the future. Yeah, no, that's great. I mean, so you wouldn't have anything else in its place, is that what you're saying? So I mean, because like school leaders are going to say, "Oh, SATs are gone. What are we going to do in their place?" Are we saying that we should first and foremost say to our leaders, "You don't need to do anything here. Let's just make sure. Let's just have the checks and balances that we have in the interim years in Key Stage 2, for instance." Like say, I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. The purpose of Key Stage 1 assessment was to be that baseline to measure progress between Key Stage 1 and Key Stage 2. So, the fact that school leaders were, really pushing for people to be, greater depth or, working at the expected level, you're only shooting yourself in the foot there 4 years later. When that year group gets to year 6, then the year 6 teacher goes, bloody hell, these kids are not where they said they were. And they've just had that because they came up to year 3 as working towards greater depth expected, whatever it might be. There's obviously then in whatever informal year group assessments that you have to, carry on that flight path. And if you veer from the flight path, danger. But we know that, flight paths are silly. I think David Adawin makes an excellent case for them being absolutely nonsensical. So I don't know, other than it being a comfort blanket, I'm not really sure what benefits you get from it. And that might be me, and I'm very happy for anyone to say, yeah, we think it's going to be really useful because ABC, and it might well be useful. But then I think, you've got to, my favorite Dylan William quote is, sometimes you have to stop doing good things to do even better things. And I think this is a case where we could stop doing a good thing if you think it is a good thing and do an even better thing, which is far more curriculum time, far more sensible paced curriculum time, and actually focus on something that I think would make a tangible difference to outcomes throughout the school. At every single point, I think that would make a massive difference. And maybe in 2 or 3 years' time, I'm going to be here, my hand in my head, and say, sorry, it didn't work. And I'll happily say that it didn't work, but I think it's worth a try. No, we as a profession, we complain about too much testing. So the fact that some school leaders would still want to do that doesn't necessarily make sense. We complain that there's too much stuff in the maths curriculum. And I'm say what's important here is that I'm not saying we don't not teach anything that's in the curriculum. I'm just saying that if we left it later, they'd learn it far more quicker. So we don't actually spend so much time early on doing the wrong doing, teaching them the maths that we know some will understand because for whatever reason, they really understood place value already, and half the class or 2/3 of the class still really haven't understood place value. So trying to get them to switch between base 10 and base 60, probably not the best idea.
Yeah. I mean, I think we've got a chance to reduce the secretarial burden on pupils at this age.
Staff as well, your year two staff. Year two staff mark those stats. That's a lot of papers. That's 3 still, what's that? 2 reading papers, punctuation paper, and I think 2 or 3 maths papers. So, there's a lot of, if you're in I'm a deputy head at a 1 form school, that's a lot of time for one person to do that. And obviously, if you're in a more than a 1 form school, you just have that compounding factor of, more bodies. So save yourself a lot of time.
Definitely. I mean, and that's always welcome. I mean, I think what we need to be careful, because like I said, about children's secretarial skills, lots of those children won't be able to read, because we're always talking about phonics in year 3 and, this push on, I mean, obviously it would be in an ideal world, all of our pupils have got the secretarial skills necessary to do things like take part in tests. I mean, obviously that's not what the skills are for, but they are a barrier when they're absent.
Yeah.
If we want some picture of how pupils are doing, I don't think the answer is giving them a test like we would in year 3, 4, and 5. Sometimes we get the optional SATs, don't we? What I think would be good is designing a task or a set of 5 tasks that draw on the things that we think are important. And so, for instance, you could say that a pupil engaging with this task has got an awareness of X, Y, and Z, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. So think about the school where they're going to think, okay, well, let's buy another test. I think better use of time would be to design, and this might take time, and it might take groups of schools to get together and put their heads together. But I think with 5 carefully written tasks, you could generally get a picture of where a pupil is at.
Yeah.
Because the things that they couldn't do within the task would depend on certain bits of mathematics, I mean, that's what I'm thinking might be worth doing.
Yeah.
I don't think anything formal should happen, and I'm totally with you. I'm on board. And I think teachers have got a clippable moment there where they can just play to their head teacher, well, here's why we shouldn't just make the same mistake that we made in 2012. Or, well, I think most schools sort of dug their heels in and made the mistake in 2016 reinventing levels. I think really well designed task can draw out lots of bits of mathematics. I mean, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I like the idea. It's a good thing you work for a maths company.
Yeah, indeed.
Giving yourself more work to do.
It's fine the time. I mean, the thing is, this is all really enjoyable stuff, designing the questions that can...
No, and I could see it kind of working almost like the reception baseline, just 1-to-1 for 10 minutes. And you're there with an iPad or some device, whatever, just inputting, can they access this? Yes or no? Something like that, maybe. Yeah, be nice. I can see that working. As long as I get my number bomb check, I don't really care.
Are you going to make your own number bomb check?
No. I think I'm sure your paymasters won't tell you off if I rep another if I rep another admirable small business, which is called Number Sense Maths, who were, I'm not going to say ahead of the game, because everything that we're kind of that I'm certainly advocating for was sort of present in the way back when we had the national strategies, because there is a beautiful document about mental maths methods within the primary school. If you Google it, national strategies, mental maths methods, it'll be one of the first hits that are there, and it kind of just outlines the kind of methods that you would use, the expectations of what each year group was. Now, this was old money in the sense, so now kind of the expectations of, and when you look at that, you realize, okay, when Gove had his way with the curriculum, they just said, well, what if we made the year 2 expectations the year 1 expectations, and just kind of, they just literally notched everything down one, which I probably, until I kind of revisited that document again recently, probably didn't quite appreciate just how simple that was. It was just, yeah, let's just move everything down a year group, and then we can say, haha, we're the party of, high standards, and we really care about what children are learning and stuff like that. So ever since that went, the kind of focus on mental methods disappeared completely. And it really, it felt like to me, Kieran, you may say otherwise, because I didn't know any better at the time, but it really did feel like as soon as the new maths curriculum came in, like all of that kind of stuff just was like, whoosh, cut. We don't have time to do any of that anymore. Let's get rid of it. But Number Sense Maths, they kind of realized that there was purpose and reason for doing that. So they carried on doing it. So they made a really nice scope and sequence. They kind of market it, which I think is right, as almost like the phonics of mathematics teaching, where it's just meant to be like a 15-minute session that almost sits separate to your main math session. All the resources are there. It's kind of, I think it's really high impact, not much effort for the teachers, because it's usually just based on playing a video which shows some animations of how things work. It's got your supertizing in there as well. So, this is one of the few actual schemes of work out there that actually says, we're going to dedicate a whole block of several weeks to just making sure that pupils have the opportunity to perceptually and conceptually supertize. And then they just take you through the way that they've organized the methods, the number facts themselves. I think it's quite clever in the sense it's not just, okay, now let's just work on 2 + 3 for this week. They take you through it. They think, no, these are the methods that we think are best suited to teach these number facts. So obviously you've got your doubles, your near doubles, etc. You're bridging through 10. And kind of from there, then they have a worksheet generator that you can just generate. I think it's up to like 45 questions. So you can kind of select which. So it's not like all or nothing. You can be quite granular, and then, if I've just taught doubles, I just want 45 questions that are just doubles. If I've taught doubles and near doubles, I want 45 questions that are both doubles, near doubles, and their related subtraction facts. So I think in my head, I was going to do one 45-minute question set, which was just number bonds within 10, like that. And then the other one was 11 to 20 with related subtraction throughout. So that's, 90 questions, which I think would give you a fair indication of student ability. I'd time it as well. I want them to know them off by heart. It's not like here's 30 minutes, take as long as you want to work it out. It's there to make sure it's not clogging up working memory. I think I did the maths. It would work out as I think it's like 5 minutes per paper, if that's what you wanted, for 45 questions, which, doesn't seem a lot or particularly stressful. And you can imagine, doing that throughout the year as they practice to, get used to it. And it just becomes the big one that you do at the end. What else would I do? I probably wouldn't have it online. I think it's at that stage. I think the online nature of it probably reduces the validity of it, because kids are probably wondering about, fingers and dexterity and all of that thing. They're still growing, and it probably takes far too long to actually, input something than it's actually worth using. And obviously, if they practice more on that, then they're writing less. And at that stage, writing stamina and all of that good stuff kind of needs to be, I think, kept sacrosanct. I think it's so important that kids are writing with pen and paper or pencil and paper. So yeah, it might mean a bit more marking, but it's 90 questions of number bonds within 20. I think it's going to be a massive impact. And I think at that stage, by the end of year 2, you could probably teach them to self-assess that quite easily. I think, pencils down, green pens out, let's go through the answers, tick, 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 tick. I've certainly been able to teach. Well, I've certainly seen it happen in year 2. I've certainly been able to teach year 3 children within, the first couple of weeks of September that this is how we mark some work. So yeah, I think that's what I'd do. It would be straight, calculation. So I wouldn't have any images or there to support them. It would just be, 9 plus 1 is, 16 plus 3 is, etc., etc.
Was it teaching children to calculate mentally that you were talking about? Is that the name of the document?
It was indeed, yeah, teaching children to calculate mentally. I literally typed in mental maths primary national strategies, and then it's our good friends at dira.ioe.ac.uk who have a PDF to access it.
Nice. And now there's an alarm going off on your school computer, alerting the government that you've been checking out the old national strategies. So,
and Neil is no longer available to do any TDAPE.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right about the computers. Not least because next year's MTC will be done on an operating system that hasn't yet been invented. If the updates continue at the current pace,
fuming.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. I mean, I don't know a single school that is that up to date all the time. But Oscar used to get. It's only really about halfway through this year, despite knowing all his times tables, that he has been not frustrated whenever doing like rock stars and things.
Yeah,
because he wants to do it as fast as he can, and he knows them really well. But he's always behind the year 4s, 5s, and 6s because
dexterity.
Back when the national curriculum changed, you mentioned, what was it like? It felt like no one had read the aims for a long time. So I remember spending a lot of time going that reasoning, fluency, and problem solving underpin this whole document, because there was a lot of chat about how it was this big list of knowledge. But the aims are laudable aims, and then the next bit of the conversation was about, well, it's not reasoning and fluency and problem solving. It's all of this together. So it was a slow process. That's what I remember, the change being slow. Like I say, we adopted it pretty early on in lots of classes, because we saw a draft in 2012, 2013, and it didn't really change in 14. But I do know schools who still weren't using it in 2016.
Wow.
The schools were, for one reason or another, slow to react to the like you said, the raised expectations, inverted commas, and the shift. It was as if this isn't happening, and then eventually the 2016 SATs happened. Everyone who had not yet sort of got on board got a bit of a shock. So it'll be interesting to see what does happen, because I don't think we do change well. But I think you had a super thread. I mean, I purposely didn't read your thread again, because I didn't want it to influence my answers. Because no point in us sitting here, I think this, and I've already said that in my thread. Yes, I think that too. So, but I think your thread had the nail on the head, as far as I remember, in terms of this is a big chance for schools to do things right. What do you think they should avoid?
Obviously, if you are going to, as I mentioned it, if you are going to take a sledgehammer to your curriculum, I don't think it would be fair necessarily that the only diet that pupils got of mathematics between reception year 1 and year 2 is just purely number. You might, not sure how you feel about that, Kieran. You may think, oh no, that's exactly what, maybe that's the point of contention here. That's where we are going to get a bit of disagreement between us. But I can't imagine that purely just having number would be the best thing for pupils. I'm not wedded to that idea. I'm happy to be persuaded else somehow. I think they should avoid trying to go to, I can imagine many providers, educational mathematical providers will now attempt to fill that void, perhaps. I'm assuming, I've not heard either way, that they're not going to be able to give you a scaled score as such of doing the SAT. So I can imagine that some head teachers may want to, and I could understand the reasons why, some sort of standardization test at the end of the year 2 that does give you an idea, or that is like norm reference, so that you can kind of work out where your children are against a wider sample of the population. So I know obviously White Rose are working with Smart Grade, I believe the company is, that will kind of offer these standardized tests. I think that should be something to be avoided, because again, it just comes up to you're just replacing, it's just like for like, really. So definitely avoid that. And I say there are plenty of other things that they should avoid when it comes to other subjects, but I'm going to keep those in my pocket later on until we talk about various other bits and pieces. But I think those are my kind of like main two. Obviously, I feel like we're quite good at going to extremes. We never really go to the center ground. So I think, one extreme is, throw the whole mass curriculum out and let's just say, oh yeah, you're only going to do number from, in year one, in key stage one, versus, not doing the SATs, but thinking about, okay, let's buy in a third party assessment, which kind of tries to standardize something, which means that effectively, and if a company brings them out for one subject, they're going to bring them out for the other two that's been replaced as well. So effectively, you're actually spending money now on something that used to happen, that you used to get for free. And was it really any use? Again, I think the jury's still quite out on that.
Yeah, and as it won't be standardized, it'll probably be guaranteed to be of less use. I mean, for me, I know that I, like you say, veer towards the extreme and really reducing things down and slimline and stuff. But we know that mathematics is best taught when the interconnected nature of mathematics is drawn on, so there's no way you could possibly only do the arithmetic side. People just wouldn't have a round enough experience. I think my view has always been, let's be sensible about the things that we do expect pupils to do. And we've already mentioned the stuff we would cut, but I don't think that's going to impoverish pupils' experience, because as they go through school, as they go through Key Stage 1, that core number, not that number sense, as you say, opens the door into all the other areas, and it's like a key that you use to unlock various different doors. And so, I'm totally with you. No one is for a second saying that we should just cut everything and just teach number sense. But hopefully it can get the position it deserves, and hopefully mental methods can get the position they deserve, and the arithmetic structures can get the position they deserve. Because the worst thing to happen would be for us just to replace it with like something that isn't free, but does exactly the same thing worse. But only time will tell. What's your prediction for 24 months' time? So let's give it a year. Everybody get a year to settle, get on board, and then everybody does something the second year.
Yeah, I don't think many schools will do much next year about it. I just think, we're in summer 2 now. If they haven't been thinking about it for a while, it's unlikely that many things will change for next year. And the year after that, the general election will definitely have happened by then, won't it, in 2 years' time? Yeah, general election has to happen next year. So 24 months' time, hoping a change of government. I can't see Labour bringing it back in, quite honestly. So I think if Labour get in, they'll be too busy thinking about how we can put 21st century skills in it, and we'll be thinking about how we can sugarcoat 21st century skills into our curriculum without really changing much at all. We might have to change the word procedural knowledge to skill, and then go, there's our skills right there.
Yeah, it'll be a very interesting time for the podcast.
Yeah,
because it is difficult as a left-leaning group of teachers. I mean, most teachers are left-leaning, aren't they, in some respect, left to center, to challenge a sort of center-right government without seeming like it's on political grounds. Because our interest is in education. This is not a political podcast. And I doubt any of our listeners could explain what my politics were, because we keep it quite close to our chest.
I think that should be the name of this episode. This is not a political podcast.
But it'll be easier to challenge them when it's not as clear that it's on political grounds. It's just on educational grounds. Unless then people start saying that we're centre right, and because teachers do get swept with that brush, don't they, when they make challenges.
A huge support, and I am a supporter of many, not all, but quite a few of the Govian reforms. A lefty trad is, I think, the terminology that's used on Twitter every now and then. Someone who's left-leaning in their politics, but quote unquote traditional teacher, which for whatever reason sort of gets tarnished with the right. And again, if that's the case, then I pity Chris Such, because he'll be a fascist by that point, because any advocate of phonics by that point will definitely be tarnished as a as some sort of alt-right wing fascist and say for their support of phonics. And Chris is definitely the least fascist person that I know.
Well, you say that, but I've got a folder of stuff, that I couldn't put in episodes. And if he ever wrongs me,
I know we're
he's
all,
in big
all
trouble.
doomed. Like mutually assured destruction, right? This is starting to get a little bit more political, but the more we talk, the more we go on.
Yeah, I mean, it's time to call it a close until we explore the other two subjects in the very near future. I mean, certainly before the end of this term, I reckon.
Definitely.
We can look at those. I mean, 24 months time, I think, yeah, stagnation next year. And then I imagine, sadly, I think we may have just reinvented the wheel. But let's track it over the next. So what are we on? We're the 7th of June today. Let's track the situation over the next 2 years, and we'll come back to this and see how we get on, because it is a big opportunity for the profession to say we are professional. We know what's best for our kids. We don't need to do things that are less than effective for them and waste our time with an opportunity cost. So all I have to do is say thank you very much for joining me. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you very much for having me.
Happy Pride to everyone who's listening. Hope you've had a really good month. And to everyone at home, until next time, thanks for listening.